blending your personal interests into your lettering work is going to do so many things for you because it's a way to like passively market yourself and tell people what you're interested in. You have to tell people what you want. People can't read your mind. The way that you get your dream projects is by incessantly talking about the things that you like. So that is actually one practical reason to talk about your interests in your work, is because clients are much more likely to actually hire you if they know that you like the thing that they're hiring for.
Well, hello, everybody. How are you doing? Welcome. Thank you so much for coming to today's Q&A session. I'm so excited to welcome Lauren Hom, who is here with me and with you as well, to this special Q&A that we are hosting inside the Lettering Seminar. I have received all of your questions and I have put them together in a way that helps us create an interesting conversation with Lauren, because we want to know it all. And you probably know Lauren from her beautiful work for her creative side projects, for also her mural work. Lauren is a lettering artist. She's a designer, a muralist, and she has worked for brands like Vans, Target, Google, and Adobe. She's also an educator, a podcaster, and recently a culinary school grad, right? Lauren, thank you so much for being on the lettering seminar today. And tell us, how are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. It's so wild hearing people read my bio back to me now when I do these events and do these interviews, because I'm like, wow, I do a lot of stuff. And if I continue to do more things, it makes your job as a host more complicated, because this is the lettering seminar and you and I met because, you're a lettering artist. I started as a lettering artist. I still am a lettering artist, but I do so many other things now. And so sometimes I feel a little bit all over the place, but it's just my personality type and I've been rolling with it. So I'm really grateful to be here with you, an expert, today.
Yeah, and I also think that a lot of our students can relate to that. As creatives, you also have different interests and you fuel your work with a lot of different stuff. So you just finished your culinary school. How was that experience for you, Lauren?
The experience was really fun. It was something that I always wanted to do, but had never really considered doing until, the pandemic lockdown. We had been inside for a long time because it just didn't seem very practical. And I actually just got back from a conference yesterday, and I was giving a talk about balancing the passion with the practicality, being a working designer. I think those are the things you're trying to balance being a commercial artist, figuring out how do I make a living, but how do I stay creatively engaged in the work? And because I had been doing lettering and design and murals for about 8 years at that point, I just felt like I needed a creative mix-up, and I decided to go. And I was talking with some people after the conference, and one gal said to me, she's like, when you announced you were going to culinary school, my first response was, I didn't know you could do that. And I laughed because I think that's a very normal reaction that people had to what I did, because I didn't let myself do that for the longest time. We can technically, as creative people, do anything we want to, but we stop ourselves a lot of times.
Absolutely. And I think that this is a great starting point for our Q&A today, because, of course, many of our students know you because of your passion projects. And we have a question from Anna that is related to that. And I'm going to read it out loud to you, and you can take it in any direction you want. So Anna is saying, your skill is unquestionably excellent. But I first learned about you on Instagram when you used to don your coif with pastries. Do you think this unique approach helped attract bigger clients? And was it mainly the quality of your work or a combination of both? And I'm going to try to share some of that work that Anna is referring to. I have it here with me. So while you answer to the question, I will just try to share some of that.
Thank you for the visual reference. Yeah, for anyone who's confused, I did a project in 2017 called Flower Crowns, where I had been doing lettering for 5 years at this point, but obviously food has been a passion of mine my entire life, and I was always looking for ways to incorporate it into my creative work or combine it with my creative skills. So I started this project called Flower Crowns, where I was making these headdresses out of food, and it was almost like a parody of the, floral crowns that you would see people wear at music festivals. And it was really just a silly project that I did to stretch some, like, I call it like a creative stretch. And to answer Anna's question, when I was thinking about this, I think that in terms of, did this lead to any client work? No, other than I think this got me noticed by like a couple companies for brand partnerships to do like artist kind of like features. But other than that, this didn't lead to any big breaks or like any big career moves. This was more of a what I call for me passion project where I wanted to make it, so I made it. And when it comes to like leveraging these things for career stuff, if you've ever like read a marketing book, or you might have heard this if you listen to podcasts, people talk about the three factors when it comes to like a hiring decision as know, like, and trust. And knowing someone is, have you heard their name before? Liking someone is, do you connect to their story? Do you like non-professional things about them? Like, are you from the same geographic area? Do you have the same interests? Do you like cooking? Do you like this project falls into the like category where someone might have come across this and said, I don't get it, it's stupid, and then kind of written me off. That's completely fine. But a lot of people saw this project and they're like, that's so fun, I want to be her friend. So that was doing a lot of work for me in the like area. And then the trust area is where you really show off your professional chops, where if someone saw this and they liked this project, they might have gone to my Instagram or my website and then looked at my portfolio and went, oh, she actually knows what she's doing. We like her work. And so you start to trust someone based off of their like actual skill set. So this is all like in hindsight, but I decided to do this project because I wanted to. And that was the point of the talk that I gave like over the weekend of the older I've gotten, the harder it is to do projects just because I want to, because I'm more adult now. I think through things a lot more deeply. It's good in some ways, but it's bad in other ways. And so this project I had a lot of fun. It's the same feeling that led me to go to culinary school, where I'm the captain of the ship of my creative journey. And if I want to make it, I should make it and put it out there. It's better than like letting the idea sit in your head and like overthinking it. So long-winded way of answering your question, Anna, I think that this project did help me build some audience and build some of that like factor, but I couldn't tell you if it directly led to anything in particular. Everything that you do in your creative journey will lead you to the next thing. There's not necessarily a direct path, but I do believe that this was a crucial part of my creative journey.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I can totally relate to that. I think in the beginning of your career, you tend to do things just because you want them. And once you have a few experiences and you realize the impact that they can have in your career and your future work, then you, without realizing, you start seeing a lot of the things you do as something that will have an impact in your future. So just as an example, when I look back at the moment where I published The Golden Secrets of Lettering, my first book, at that time, I didn't realize I wanted to, that the book will have an impact in my career. I just wanted to make a book. I had an idea for a book, so I put it together and I brought it into the world. And now when I look back, I think like, well, that had a huge impact in my career, because nowadays a huge part of my work is as an educator, as a lettering educator. So now when I think of writing a book, I'm inevitably, I think about like, what is the impact that this is going to have in the future? And it's really hard to step back and do things just for fun, which I think is great that you bring it up. And it's great that you also took the chance to just go to culinary school because this is what you wanted. Now, I would love to hear from one passion project that you did initiated with this in mind. So this one, the first one with the adornments in your head, were just something you wanted to do. Was there a specific project that you initiated because you actually thought, okay, I'm gonna I'm going to do this. And this relates actually to a question Marty sent over, which says, when you create a personal project, is having a portfolio piece the end goal, or are you also thinking about monetizing it, right? So the same for a passion project. So for example, he's saying, when you painted the mural in your studio, was that always meant to become something you would teach later, or was that a happy accident?
Ooh, it's kind of like the classic chicken before the egg, like which came first,
Mm.
right? I think that
Yeah.
there are multiple factors at play when I'm coming up with a passion project. There are projects where I have thought about, I would like to get paid for this eventually. So something like flower crowns, I didn't really see examples of how people were monetizing stuff like this, and I didn't quite mind because I wanted to do the project just for fun. However, something like painting murals, right, in my studio, or something like my chalkboard project I did about a decade ago, Will Letter for Lunch, where I was lettering chalkboards with menu items at restaurants in exchange for those menu items in order to build a chalk portfolio. I did that with a portfolio in mind. So you can kind of like, there are two kind of entry points to passion projects sometimes. With the murals in particular, I never thought I was going to teach around that, but I knew that I would like to paint them someday. And I always tell my students and anyone who's interested in painting murals, if you want to paint a mural, you need to just start painting the largest surfaces you have access to, whether that is your house, a friend's house, just a big canvas from the art store, a big piece of wood, whatever it is. Try to go bigger with your work as soon as possible and just start to practice and gain those skills, because especially with something as tactile as a mural, people are much more likely to hire you if you have examples already. And I know it's one of those things where it's like, wait, in order to get the work, I have to have it in my portfolio already. It can be a little bit confusing. But if you do, this is the power of personal projects, where you build the portfolio before anyone pays you in order to prove to people that, like, hey, my work is quality, like I can do this. And then you can actually start to command like regular prices before you start versus doing a bunch of stuff for free or very little money. That's been my personal preference, to do stuff for free for myself first and then get paid for it afterwards, because I've always felt like a bit of a tension where, you maybe like a friend or a family member or a friend of a friend asks for you to do any kind of work for them, and they have $100 or 50 euros, right? And it seems better than nothing, but there's something that goes off in a lot of our brains of because you know you're being underpaid so much, you don't do your best work. It's kind of like this catch-22, and you put yourself in a trap. So I would rather do the work for free for me, because then I'm not expecting any money from anybody. And then people can pay me like a normal rate for the work after I've already done it and built up the skill for myself. Because one of the misconceptions too, I think, with portfolios is you can't put personal work in there. I think personal work is just as valid as client work in a portfolio, especially if it is quality and it's something that you want to do. Of course, it's good to have a mix of both to show that clients trust you, but people really do care about the work more so than the name that's attached to it or who commissioned it or like when it was done. So yeah, when it comes to passion projects, with the mural stuff, I did it knowing that I would like to get paid for this in the future, but it was fun for me too. And the teaching came organically after that. Similar to you, Martina, I'm sure it was like people asked enough questions where you thought, maybe I should compile a resource because there's like 50 people asking the same question. And so that's how it came to be.
For sure. And I think that's a great, also for our students, a great insight. I think I always say that, in order to be a successful artist, you need to find that overlap between what you love doing and what people want from you. And I think that putting a little bit of
Yeah.
like a piece of work in the world, it creates that feedback or gives you that feedback. If people start asking about it, if they have more questions, if they want to know how you did it, then this is where you start finding that overlap. And then you see, okay, there's market demand for that. There's people who are interested in this. Then how can I go deeper? And you can just dive deeper into that. So you were touching
Absolutely.
on your mural work, and there were a lot of questions about murals and how to dive into
I love seeing those.
yes, and one of the questions that came was from Andrea, who is really interested in diving into creating murals, and she's asking about your first, really the technical aspects of translating a digital sketch into a large case, a large scale physical mural. So you mentioned before that something you
Mhm.
recommend for everybody wanting to dive into mural lettering is that they just start drawing bigger or at a bigger scale. So what is the process for translating something that you draw on your iPad or you draw on paper into a huge mural piece?
Ooh, I'm trying to think of how to even break down the process visually. Okay. The process from drawing on your iPad or a piece of paper to translating it to a large scale mural is not as complicated as you think. It is much more like if you can draw on a small scale, you can translate it up and paint. It's the muscle memory of just your body's used to like being hunched over your iPad, right? Drawing. The reason I recommend just painting or drawing on a larger scale to start to practice leading up to a mural is to just train your eye and your hand to work at a scale that's like larger than your body, because we're not used to making strokes that are, a foot or a meter long. It's not very intuitive for most of us. And so it's similar to any kind of muscle memory with exercise or any other kind of skill. In terms of scaling it up, there are so many ways to translate your small drawing to the large wall, depending on the space. And so I always tell my students it really depends on the wall that you're painting on. If you're painting indoors and you have access to a projector and it can be dark and you have like a power outlet you can use, projecting is the fastest and easiest way, where you basically that scales it up, you get to trace it. There's no shame in projecting. You might hear some old school muralists or sign painters say that it's cheating. It's not cheating, absolutely not. Tune that out. But the thing about being a muralist is you can't always use a projector. I would say that half of the murals I've painted, using a projector wasn't even an option because there was no power. We could only transfer the artwork during the daytime, so you can't see a projection in the daytime. So you need to know the 3 to 5 other transfer techniques in order to get your work on the wall. And there are some analog ones where I have a blog post about this on my site that I can link you to, Martina, if you want to send it to the students. But you can print out your drawing at a large scale. You grid it out and you print it and you tape it to the wall and you basically trace it that way, kind of like the old school like chalk rubbing technique. You can also use a method called pouncing, where you cut little holes along the lines of your printout. Obviously, this means printing out big pieces of paper. Like, it's still a whole production. You can also use the old school grid method. Maybe some of us learned this in grade school, where you take the small drawing and you draw a grid over it, and then you have grid A1, A2, A3, A4, and then you make the same grid on the wall in proportion, and then you draw each square out by hand. These are all very time-consuming techniques, and it's really just back to basics drawing, but at a larger scale. So if you can do it small scale, you can do it large scale. There's also a method called the doodle grid, which is the looser version of a regular grid. There are so many techniques that you can use to get the art on the wall. And I will say, for a brand new muralist, that tends to be the part that scares my students the most, is transferring the artwork, because you can draw and you probably know you can paint and you know how to pick colors, like all those skills. It's the largeness of the wall that is intimidating, and rightly so. And so I would highly recommend looking up all the different transfer techniques. You could read about them for hours. You have to actually try them to see what you're comfortable with, which is why I recommend, like, maybe even on a weekend, take one of your iPad drawings and can you scale it up to just a small, like a large canvas that you get at the store. It doesn't have to be a full wall yet. The very first mural that I painted was only about maybe the size of a door. It was in the hallway. It was the end of a hallway at an office, and it wasn't huge, but it was much bigger than anything I had ever painted before. And I actually just freehanded it, which is also an option. Not the best option if you are a perfectionist or your design is very precise, but that's also an option too, to freehand it. And so my advice, if you are, depending on how much of a risk taker you are, or if you're okay with messing up, just start to scale up slowly. Go a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, and eventually you will get more comfortable and realize, oh, it's not so bad. It's similar to the first time you do public speaking or an interview or do anything new for the first time. Once you get it done, you're like, oh, that actually was much scarier thinking about it than actually doing it. That's my best advice there.
That's great. So I was thinking of the process of creating a mural,
Yeah.
and we just started from creating the actual design on a paper, even if it's just a doodle
Yeah.
or an idea or a rough sketch of what you're going to do. Then there is the process of translating that sketch into a large scale mural, and then the painting actually starts, right? That this is where you start adding colors to the design.
Yeah.
So what are some of the tools or materials that you use to actually draw or add color to the mural? And what are the difference between the murals indoors and outdoors?
Yes. So the biggest difference between the murals indoors and outdoors are the types of material you're going to use. So you're going to need paint that can withstand the elements, right? Rain, sun, snow. And that usually just means purchasing paint that is meant for the outside of a house. So exterior house paint is what I typically paint with for outdoor murals. You can also use spray paint if you're outside because of the fumes. It's too much inside, I found. So you can also use spray paint. With outdoor murals, you are also working with the elements. So whether it's a really hot day and you're going to need to take breaks and drink a lot of water, right? Your paint brushes might dry up faster. So you're going to have some like water or even some like chemicals that can slow down the dry time on your paint so you can work with them faster. Or maybe it's really cold and rainy out and you can't paint. So there are some factors with outdoor murals that make it a little more difficult. So certainly more challenging. If you're a beginner, I would highly recommend starting indoors because there's just a little more like control. If at all possible, indoors in your own space, whether that's your house or your studio. And again, if let's say you don't own, but you rent and you can't paint your walls, get a big board, get a big canvas. Because if you are in your own space, then you can stay there for as long as you want. There's no time constraints. It'll be a lot less stressful for you. Indoor murals, I like to use interior house paint, pretty simple. I would always recommend using paint that is meant for like painting rooms and painting walls instead of going to the art store and buying tubes of acrylic, because those paints are, even though they can be more highly pigmented, they're expensive and they weren't formulated to cover large areas the way that house paint was. House paint has primer built into it, so it's going to have really good coverage. It's going to go on really smoothly, and it's just a different application. So go to the hardware store or the house painting store and just get cheap interior house paint. That is my favorite. It's cost effective and they have a good range of colors. If there's a color that you absolutely can't find there, then you can go to the art supply store, but it will get very expensive if you just go to the art store to get your mural paints. And then in terms of tools, I keep my toolkit pretty simple. So I have, foam rollers to roll the background colors or bigger areas on the wall. I usually have like a large roller and then a small roller. So maybe I'm rolling a smaller shape, and then maybe I have the large roller to roll the background color. And then brushes, I use two sizes of brushes. I have a 1-inch angled brush and a 2-inch angled brush, and that's really it. There is a counterintuitive thing where when you're starting out painting murals, you probably have small paintbrushes in your studio right now that you're like, okay, let's say I have maybe I'm going to paint the inline of a letter or some fine detail work in my mural. I'm going to get a tiny paintbrush and I'm going to do that for the detail. I would highly recommend actually learning how to use a thinner but longer brush, whether that is, for me, a 1-inch angled brush, or you could even get like a sign painting brush or just something that has the bristles of the brush that are about like this long, as long as they're long, because you're going to want a brush that holds a lot of paint so you're not constantly dipping back and forth, because then your mural will look bumpy and kind of patchy. So it's counterintuitive, but try to use a bigger brush than you need and lighter pressure to get finer detail, because the smaller brushes, you will get too frustrated. It'll take too long.
Amazing. So we have it all. We have the tools, we have the paint. And Andreas and also Amy's, they were wondering about how do you land your first mirror project? What was that experience for you, and what will you do differently today?
Yeah. Are we talking about first paid mural project?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Like a professional gig. Yeah.
Yes. So for me, my first paid mural project was after I had done this is during, this is 2014. I had done a chalkboard mural for, I taught a chalkboard mural class for Skillshare. I just shared the story in my talk. And because I did the chalkboard mural, they said, "Oh, do you paint murals too?" And in the back of my mind, I knew I had never painted a paid mural before, but I had painted a couple murals in my apartment and for friends. So I had a portfolio already. And so I said, "Yeah, I can paint murals." Even though I was nervous because here's a big company, like I'm like, "Oh, they're gonna know that I don't have any client work," and I was feeling very nervous. But I showed them my personal work, and they said, "Oh, yeah, that's great. We would love for you to paint a mural." And that was the small door-sized mural that I painted. I got paid $500. It wasn't a lot of money, but I wanted the client project in my portfolio. So that was the small project that I freehanded. So I got my first paid mural from having personal murals in my portfolio and from doing a client project where they liked my work in one medium and they saw that I could do it in another medium. So it was kind of like a client crossover. And this is another layer of that story. The way that I got that chalk Skillshare project was I was walking around on the weekend handing out flyers of my work for my chalk project. So old school marketing, right? Like just handing out flyers. And so I always tell that story to show people, obviously it's not going to happen every time, but the very real, tangible marketing pipeline of putting yourself out there. You never know who's going to see your work. This is completely off the internet too. This is just me handing out flyers about my work to restaurants and to food vendors. And the reason why the story is so I can't believe it happened is when I was handing out the flyers to different food vendors at this market on the weekend, the next day or on Monday, I got an email from Skillshare saying, "Hey, you handed out a flyer to our CEO and we've been looking for a chalk teacher." And I thought, when did I see the CEO of Skillshare? So I Googled CEO Skillshare and I recognized his face. And it turns out that at the time, the founder of Skillshare had a passion project selling soup at the market.
That's amazing. That's an
I
amazing
know.
story.
It really just goes to show every creative person has a passion project on the side, something else that they're passionate about. We have so many ideas, and the more of them that you can bring to life and nurture, the more opportunities you're going to open yourself up to. So here's me, passion project chalkboard. Here's him, passion project soup. And we just kind of met up, and that's how I got my first mural, which is kind of nuts to talk about. But from there, I was able to say okay, now I have a big client name like Mural, and I was able to turn that into more mural projects. But I was going to suggest a more practical route too, to if you want to build up your mural portfolio, once you get, some practice on your own, I used to offer murals to friends and to even this is 10 years ago, but I used to post on Instagram like, hey, I'm looking to practice, uh, you know, lettering murals in Brooklyn. Does anybody have a wall that's available? You can just buy me dinner and I just want to come practice in your apartment. And I was able to build up some mural painting experience for what I call fake clients, like people who didn't quite know me, but people who weren't just can you paint my logo? What you want to avoid when you are starting out as a muralist is you want to get jobs that are actually stuff you're excited to put in your portfolio. You don't want to get if you post on Instagram saying, hey, I'm looking to paint, and you don't tell people what you want, you will get people saying, oh, hey, can you paint my baby's nursery? And maybe you're not interested in that. And if you say yes to that, then you're going to start building a portfolio in a direction that you don't like. Or you might get someone saying, hey, can you paint my gym logo on the side of the building? If that's not interesting to you, you should definitely not do it, especially for free. So I think that there's a fine line too between muralists, think about the kind of murals you want to paint. Do you want to be more of an artistic muralist, or do you want to be a sign painter where you are painting logos on the side of buildings? If that's interesting to you, then do the gym logo on the building. But if it's genuinely not interesting to you, which personally it's not interesting for me, only because it's such hard work, and I would rather have a little bit of my hand in the artistic vision rather than be just someone to execute the project. But that's a personal preference. No, it's not any lesser than to be a sign painter by any means. Sign painting is incredible. It's just a different skill set and a different business model. So think about the kind of stuff you want, and when you are putting some feelers out there, don't just say, hey, I'm looking to paint. Tell people what you're looking to paint, and then you will find fewer but better opportunities to start building that portfolio. And once you have even a couple of those in your portfolio, then likely those people will tell their friends, or you'll be able to say, hey, I painted a couple murals in this style that I like, and then you can start charging for them. You can also, one easy way, at least here in the States, I'm not quite sure how it works elsewhere, but if you look up, so there's a decent amount of public funding for the arts here in the States. And so you can look up your local city, or maybe even regional mural festivals, where a lot of cities will commission artists they're saying, hey, we're looking to do a neighborhood beautification project where we want 10 local artists to paint walls in the city, and you can apply to those. And usually it's not the most money. It might be a couple $1,000s, but it's not nothing. It's an okay budget a lot of times, especially for your first paid mural project. And in order to apply for those, though, you usually have to have some experience painting, which is where doing the personal murals comes into play. To have a couple photos to send over that you know how to paint, they just want to know that you have some experience. So if you can look up any publicly funded arts programs, especially locally is going to be your easiest in, because local projects want local artists, and so the pool is going to be smaller. So I think that's my best advice there for getting your foot in the door for a paid project.
That's super helpful. And also that gives you that practice into creating real murals. I was wondering if a
Yes.
way to fill your portfolio would be also to, once you go through these experiences and you understand how you can actually paint a mural, will you also feed your portfolio with mock-ups? So creating artwork in small size and then creating mock-ups as if they were murals?
Yes, absolutely. I think that mock-ups can be just as effective. I always suggest, though, don't start doing mock-ups until you know how to paint the mural. At least be confident that you can paint, even if you've painted a bad mural, let's say you don't like it, but just know how to do it. So when someone sees your beautiful, perfect mock-up, right, on a 100-meter wall, you don't mock anything up that you're not confident you could figure out how to paint. It's okay if you haven't painted something that big, but at least feel 75% confident that you could figure it out. So I usually won't mock up anything and post it unless it's like, if it's 25% outside of my comfort zone, I'm okay with that. Like, but like, you definitely don't want to bite off more than you can chew. But I do think mock-ups can be a great way to present work to clients, to show people what's possible. Everybody who's watching this is a visual person. I'm a visual person, and oftentimes people can't really believe it until they see it. So I think mock-ups can be very helpful as well. But just make sure that you can deliver on the mock-ups that you're posting.
That's so great. Thank you so much for all these insights into
Of
mural
course.
painting and how do you get more, or how do you, as you put your foot in the door when it comes to mural painting. And I would love to take a left turn
Yeah.
here and talk about a little bit about your style, because we are going right now throughout the module of the program where we speak about, where our students try out or explore different lettering styles. So lettering
Hmm.
styles that have to do with script lettering and serif lettering and sans serif lettering. So, and I call this part of the program the part in which you expand your vocabulary as an artist. So being able to draw different styles and draw different letter shapes help you be able to tackle different projects. And you, as a lettering artist, you have such a clear voice. So I would love to talk a little bit about this for a minute, because I know that our students are wondering, hey, how do I do what Lauren does? How do I create in a style that is unique? So I have a question from Kate, which is, what were the most influential aspects in developing your personal lettering and design style? Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah. So my entry point into lettering was very unconventional. I did not study type or even design. I went to school for advertising and marketing. But as part of our program, we were allowed to take a couple, extracurricular design classes, and we had to take one typography class, just one, in our foundation year. And I remember one of our assignments was we had to draw all 26 of the like A through Z Roman capitals on like large sheets of paper. And the instructor was like, okay, you're going to draw all the Roman capitals very large. And the point is so you can learn the nuances of the curves and the angles. And like similar to what we were just talking about with murals, when it's much larger instead of like tiny on a page, you are able to uh, you're able to see the different, like, oh, okay, like the serifs need to be this height, and like, okay, my counters aren't quite like relating to each other. And when we were able to see up close and personal, I really enjoyed lettering. And then my teacher gave me a compliment, and he was like, oh, you seem to have a knack for this. And it just kind of planted a seed in my mind. And so I ended up just taking on lettering as a hobby. And the way I developed my style was very, how would I say, unconventional, in the sense that because I wasn't going to school for it, and this is, 15 years ago, which sounds kind of nuts to say, but this is before, like, I didn't even have an Instagram. This is when Pinterest was just becoming a thing. Like, there was a severe lack of visual inspiration on the internet, like, and not a lack, but it was a different kind of visual inspiration. So Martina, you are familiar with this era. It was the design blog era. It
Yeah.
wasn't the social media era. And so, I was very influenced by your work, Jessica Hish's work, anyone whose lettering work was making the design blog like routes. And I remember just being taken by like, oh, here are all these people publishing, personal projects and lettering quotes and like this wide range of styles. And because there, like the lettering seminar didn't exist in 2010, right? Like there wasn't a lot of online education either. So I'm very self-taught, and so my style was kind of developed looking at design blogs and practicing in my dorm room. And for that reason, I've always been okay with this. Because I'm a self-taught letterer, like I think that the use case for my style of lettering, which is fun, friendly, very handmade, it's not perfect. It is very approachable. It's a different style than your kind of lettering, Martina, which is, to me, beautiful, precise, like it's gorgeous. Like it is so technically beyond what I am able to do, even though I am skilled and you are skilled. We're skilled in different ways. And I always like to talk to people about this because I used to think that I wasn't going to be able to work as a lettering artist unless I could be as technically skilled as you or Jessica. But because of the nature of the internet and because I put out a large volume of not great work, to be honest, but in a fun way, like I was doing passion projects, I was packaging up my imperfect lettering in a way that got it circulating. And I always tell people, like, the fact that I look back at some of my earlier lettering and I go, oh, like that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. Like it's so much of it is wrong. But people didn't really care so much because it still was legible and it still had like a personality to it. And I've always thought about lettering as adding personality to words and phrases. And as we all know, like personalities, there's hundreds of different personalities that people have, and they're right for different times. So I developed my style just kind of teaching myself and doing things wrong and then correcting them. And the reason that my work, I had someone ask in a workshop this weekend how, like, if I vectorize my work, and I go, only when I have to. Like, my process is just, I would still prefer to draw either on paper and scan it in to get like a little bit of the crunchiness around the edges, or like, on an iPad with a raster brush. Those are just the ways that I can get the line quality that I want. So the way I developed my style was really through that. And that's why my work looks the way that it looks now.
Lauren, and I dare to add something to this, just from my perspective, like
Yes,
looking
please.
at your work and following your journey, that I think that you were also showing up as an artist very often. That means that you were not only putting out work out there that you were creating and you were sharing your process, but you were also showing up as an artist and showing your personality and being in front of the work. I speak often about the fact that many artists and designers hide behind the work, and I'm one of them. Right now I no longer do it, but in the beginning of my career, I used to believe that the work should speak for itself, and this is all I need to show about what I do. And I think in your case, you were really like showing up as an artist as well, and you were one of the first artists that I recognize developing their personal brand by showing up, by sharing your story, by talking about your process. So I think that really added personality to your work and made it stand out. Do you believe that this is something that played a role?
Yeah, thank you for saying that. That means a lot coming from you, someone I've looked up to for a long time. And you're right. There are different like camps of thinking, and neither is necessarily right or wrong. I think it's maybe a more traditional way to think that the work should speak for itself. Unfortunately, I was just talking with people about this. Unfortunately, now, like, 15 years later, it seems like, for whether people want to or not, because of the currents of algorithmic social media feeds and the looming threat of generative AI, it almost seems like an imperative to show your personality now, to show the humanity behind the work, because how else can we differentiate ourselves? Like, unfortunately, I'm not sure if beautiful work is enough anymore, except for the, very, very top percentile of beautiful work creators. When I think about the artistic point, you're correct in like it felt intuitive to me, maybe because I was young when I started, to just be social and to share. And, I was an open book, and it felt intuitive to use the internet in that way, especially because we got a computer with the internet in my family home, right? When I was, I don't know, 12. And so to come up as a child and teenager with the internet made it feel more, I think, uh, comfortable for people of my generation and younger to just be on the internet, right? So it's definitely a generational thing too. Whereas you see kids even younger than me now, just like putting everything on the internet, and I'm like, oh, interesting. And I do think that it was, in hindsight, it was very helpful. It now, I think, talking with students, the ones who don't want to do it, I really feel for them, because it shouldn't have to be that you need to build a personal brand too, but it is very, very helpful in having something that differentiates you from everybody else. And it's not necessarily that you have to build a brand off of your personality and your personal life. Like, if you look at my Instagram, I only share the parameters that I set for myself so I don't go crazy is I only share things as they relate to my creative interests and my work. So it's usually lettering, design, murals, food, and like building stuff, like anything creative. And then anything related to being a freelancer. But I don't share my family that much, other than like joking stuff about my dad. I don't share my personal relationships. I try to keep some stuff private, just so like I have some guardrails when I'm sharing, because otherwise it can feel like, especially when people are curious about you, it can feel like, oh, I should answer every single question. And I just, as a creative person, I can't be on my phone for hours a day. It makes me feel sad. And so I have to set those kind of parameters in order to stay sane on the internet. But absolutely, showing up as an artist, showing up as authentically me, sharing what I felt like sharing, talking about the process, and then creating projects, not just about, lettering. So for example, I noticed when I was starting out that there were a lot of like early Instagram lettering artists who would do exclusively like Bible quotes, right? Or exclusively like quotes from older pieces of literature. And from a legal standpoint, the reason that people letter these quotes is because they're free domain, I guess, public domain, and you can't get sued for lettering those quotes, which is great. Um, and so I neither of those things ever resonated with me on like a personal level, like to letter stuff from like Shakespeare or to letter stuff from the Bible. And so I ended up creating my own projects where I could letter phrases that I wanted to letter. And I think that that's still a helpful way to think about, as a lettering artist, trying to find your voice and trying to find your style holistically. What are the phrases that you're drawn towards? Are they funny? Are they irreverent? Are they serious? Are they motivational? Are they social justice oriented? Are they like, what are you oriented towards? And can you start to not only letter quotes in those arenas, but can you start to write some of your own? Because if you can write your own phrases or come up with your own phrases, you can also, this is like where like my business brain comes in. You can also sell those. You don't have to ask permission to use them. Like, if there's a way to also start to become, like, by no means do you need to become a poet or a writer, but the
Yeah.
way that I broke through on the internet, and granted, 15 years ago, the internet was different, but I was doing my daily dishonesty project, which I was 21 at the time, and I was lettering all of the little white lies that my girlfriends and I would tell ourselves, like, I'll be there in 5 minutes, or, calories don't count on the weekend, like silly, silly stuff like that, I look back on now. I'm 34 years old, and I'm like, oh, it's so stupid, but people loved it. Like, other 21-year-olds on the internet loved it. And if you just publish stuff that you and your friends would share with, like, everyone's DMing each other memes all the time. Can you come up with stuff that you would share with your friends, because then you will organically find like-minded people. And yes, the internet is not the nicest place all the time. There are going to be people who don't like or don't relate to the phrases that you might be lettering, but I would encourage everybody, if you want to have like an extra edge or like an extra like leg up on your competition, to start to think about the kinds of phrases that you might want to letter that could help not only build your skill, but build that personal brand that Martina was talking about. Because when you're choosing phrases, like those are small little decisions that are starting to build your portfolio and people's perception of you as well.
For sure. And in a way, with your work, you're supporting those quotes, those statements. So it's
Yeah.
also a way of putting your own values, your own opinions out there. So I
Mm-hmm.
wrote down texts as a way of building your style. You had a certain selection of texts, the text that you were creating. You had a certain approach to letter creation, which was this imperfection or this perfect imperfection.
Yeah.
Um, there was also this element of sharing your personality and building your personal brand. There was also an element of color, right? So color, it seems
Yes.
that your work makes a huge part of building this style. So Jorge was asking, how do you find inspiration for your color palettes? Jorge is struggling with this, and he's been a fan of your work for years. And he's saying that your design always looks cohesive. Do you have any tips for Jorge?
Ooh, color is so subjective. My friends and I always joke about how it feels like in the design world, it's either you dress like this or you dress in all black and white. And I think that when it comes to color in your work, if you're struggling with color, I think picking colors that make you happy, that feel like you. So for example, are there any colors that you enjoy wearing? Are there any colors that you see a lot of in your home? Have you maybe unconsciously filled your home with blue, or unconsciously filled your home with warmer colors? There might be some maybe telltale signs that you're gravitating towards certain palettes already. The short answer is that you can find color palette inspiration everywhere online now, right? You can just Google color palette inspiration, or you can buy books with pre-made color palettes, but those aren't yours, right? They don't. There's no reason why that you chose those colors. The way that I started choosing colors for my work was, again, very imperfect, very like almost like uninformed. I would start with, so this is very similar actually to my mural process. I always start with the background color because it's the largest amount of color on the page. And I would start by picking a color that just felt like it matched the phrase. And because I started my lettering portfolio with my daily dishonesty project, which was very silly, irreverent. I was 21 years old. Because it was a very fun project, I would choose very bright colors. And I think the palette that naturally developed from that project, when I would choose the background colors, and because I was publishing to a Tumblr blog and they were going to be seen one after the other, I started kind of cycling through, you know, uh, reds and oranges and yellows, and like I would kind of mix things up, and I naturally gravitated towards, I was like, oh, I think that corals and teals are kind of my favorite, most used colors. And it's kind of like what Martina was saying earlier about, you know, making work, putting it out there and getting some feedback. Like getting the feedback from yourself too is important. So I talk a lot about this. You need to make enough work to step back and be able to see a through line, whether it's stylistically, thematically, color palette wise. And so this this is harder than, or easier said than done. But if you can just try to go be intuitive and pick colors, right? That like, okay, I think that I'm really feeling this kind of green, or I love this red. Use that as your background color for your lettering piece, and then choose complementary colors to that for your accent colors, maybe your drop shadow, your inline for your lettering piece. go from there. Start with the background color because it does take up the most amount of real estate on the page. Try to do that intuitively for the next 5 pieces that you make and see if there's anything that you learn from that, because you will get so much more out of developing your own process for picking color than trying to find a hack or trying to find, the perfect color palette book out there. And I think that's why you're signed up for something like the lettering seminar, is to start to develop the design, like the thinking and the skill set to build on this practice, right? So for me, the color palette that I got known for was picked imperfectly and intuitively.
That's great. And then you started seeing these patterns or finding these
Yes,
patterns in your work, and then kind of diving deeper into that, right?
yes.
I always,
I have one
yeah.
practical tip that I wanted to finish with. So I would pick a background color. So let's say I picked like a warm orangey red. The way that I would pick my like accent color for my like drop shadow of my lettering was, because I took, 1 or 2 color theory classes in college, I would always pick a color on the opposite side of the color wheel to complement that. So if I did a warm orange, like background color, I would try to choose like a cooler blue or green, like not exactly opposite, but just somewhere on the other side of the color wheel. I just found that that looked nice to my eye. But like you'll see other artists who use like clashing colors and it somehow works for them. Or
Hmm.
you'll see other artists who use rainbow, who like to use like 12 colors. My color palettes tend to be very limited. I'll use usually no more than 3 or 4 colors in a piece. Even though they are bright colors, I have a pretty limited color palette per piece that I use, because I like to add a lot of embellishments and stuff in my pieces. I tend to like limit the number of colors that I use. And that's just a personal preference. One of my best friends, a designer named Zepeng Zhu here in New York, he uses rainbow in all of his work. And I've never used rainbow in a single piece, even though both of us love color. It's a personal style choice.
I love that. Thank you for sharing
Of
this
course.
technical tips on how to choose a color scheme. I want to touch as we come closer to the last
Hmm.
questions of this Q&A. I want to touch shortly on this new twist in your creative journey, which is culinary school. We talked about it in the beginning, but I would love to dive into some of the questions that came in relation to that. So we have 2 questions, one of Jessica and another one of Janet. The one of Jessica is, how has a culinary school informed your lettering work, if it has in some way? And also the question from Janet, which I think we can combine in one answer. So Janet loves your food inspired lettering. And what tips do you have for artists trying to blend their other passions or hobbies with their lettering work?
Ooh, okay. Let me answer the first one. Since culinary school, I have been doing obviously lots of food projects. And leading up to culinary school too, I started incorporating
Mm.
more food into my work. I think that culinary school has informed my lettering in the sense that a lot of what I learned in culinary school actually relates a lot to lettering, in terms of it's very technical, it's very like precise. You have to, there are very set kind of rules for certain things, because I've always been drawn to certain like creative practices that have like a high utility. And what that means is like, I like that the purpose of lettering is to communicate a phrase. Like, I like that parameter, other than like, I think I would have a hard time being like an abstract painter, right? I need some bounds of like, okay, here's the purpose. And I like that with food, the purpose is to like feed people. And so with culinary school, I think because I became a better, more technical, precise cook, I've been able to execute my like food art and food lettering even better. And for me, this relates to a question that came up in a workshop I taught this weekend, but my food like lettering and food styling philosophy is, I try to make everything out of real food. I don't use any like shoe polish or glue or like fake stuff to style the food, because uh I want to be able to either eat or compost everything afterwards. And that's just my personal preference and philosophy. I also think that like, because I love to cook, I don't just love to like do food styling. I, it's very important that the food looks like real food and is real food. So culinary school just made me better at like the technical skill of cooking the food and like styling it. In terms of, I feel like we could record like 5 more episodes about this. I was gonna say, I learned so much about from culinary school just about the parallels between being a chef, like the career path of a chef, and the career path of like a freelance designer muralist. It's actually really, there's a lot of similarities of just like tastes changing, like having to adapt all the time, like thinking about other ways to diversify your income. Like it's really, really interesting. But to answer the last question about wait, was this about
How do you fuse? So what tips do you have
mm,
for artists trying to blend their other passions and hobbies with their lettering work? So the same way that you
yes.
blended a culinary school or a passion for cooking into your lettering work.
Yes.
Do you have any tips? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, this is my jam. Okay. So as we were talking about in this interview, like blending your personal interests into your lettering work is going to do so many things for you because it's a way to like passively market yourself and tell people what you're interested in. Because you could letter an inspirational quote, like live, laugh, love, or you could letter something about something you're deeply interested in and passionate about. Sure, it might have a more niche audience, but you will likely attract a more devoted and interested audience if you actually start to talk about what you're interested in. So even if it's something like, you could use your lettering work to talk about, if you're like, I don't have any interests, like you could use your lettering work to talk about like how hard it is to learn a skill, right? Like you're in this class, you could talk about the process of learning or being a student or like always trying new things. Like even if you are going to letter inspirational quotes, if you can narrow in on a lane of those things of like, what kind of stuff are you inspired by right now? What is the purpose? Like, what do you need inspiration for? Um, so to incorporate your interests, you could either choose phrases or words related to, let's say for me, right, it's cooking. I could letter quotes about cooking. I could include illustrations with my lettering about food. I could illustrate the letter forms out of food or just incorporate those like that imagery. Or I can make the actual letter forms out of food, right? Like real food and photograph it. So there are multiple ways, whether it's medium or topic, that you can start to incorporate your interests into like your actual lettering work. And it's really up to you based on like the space you have, the capacity you have, and the style that you've been developing in this class. Like maybe you don't like illustration at all. So you're like, okay, I'm not going to illustrate anything. Maybe you feel like you do want to get off the computer and start to like, maybe you love to, I don't know, maybe you just got into ceramics, right? And you're working with clay. Maybe you want to build some letter forms out of like clay. That could be cool. Or maybe you want to take what you learned and paint your letters. Or maybe you love to run and you want to try to make some like letters out of shoelaces. Or you want to like carve a rubber stamp that kind of looks like the tread of like a shoe and then stamp that into dirt. Like actually my students and I did this weekend for a completely different, we did an editorial lettering class, but we did a exercise where I said, okay, our assignment was to do a magazine cover around a cheeseburger. So we were doing like where to eat in the city, casual eating. And I was like, write down a list of your interests and do like a word association, like a brainstorm. So let's say if cheeseburgers were your interests, I was like, what are all the words that you associate with cheeseburgers and like this kind of restaurant? Like, and can you take any inspiration from that? And can your flourishes look like French fries? Can your flourishes look like sesame seeds? Can they look like droplets of ketchup? Like, this is where the like extra layer of creative, like cleverness and insight comes into play. And so taking that same exercise and thinking about, okay, what's your hobby? What's your interest? And write down all the different words that you associate with that interest. And maybe there's one or two of them that stand out to you that could give you some like place to brainstorm, to think about how you might want to incorporate it into your lettering work, whether that is in a physical form or like, you can also just have a note on your phone collecting quotes about about that topic. And I think doing a mix of both is important, because what I found to be true in my 12 years of being a full-time self-employed lettering artist and creative person is the reason I do passion projects and talk about stuff that I'm interested in is because you have to tell people what you want. People can't read your mind. Uh, the way that you get your dream projects is by incessantly talking about the things that you like. I I have one designer that works with me, and she loves music. She plays the bass guitar. She loves to go to concerts. She just loves music. She grew up listening to music, whereas I didn't. I still like music, but she loves music. And I'm always telling her, like, because she'll get, whenever she gets a music related project, she's just over the moon. And I love that for her. And I was like, the more you talk about music, whether it's personally, publicly, the more you talk about music and incorporate that into your personal work, the more clients will think of you when they happen to have a music related project, because clients would prefer to hire artists who are already well versed in the terminology and the culture of the project that they're commissioning artwork for. So that is actually one practical reason to talk about your interests in your work, is because clients are much more likely to actually hire you if they know that you like the thing that they're hiring for.
One thing that I wrote down is this thing of like, you have to tell the world what you want. And I love that as a message for our students as well. This idea that through your work or the work that you put out there, you are telling the world the work you want to do. So I think that's super powerful as a concept, Lauren. And I appreciate that you're giving our students this hint on how to attract work that they love, right? Because that's the reason why most of our students are here, because they want to build careers that they love. They want to start working in projects they are passionate about. And I think a great way of doing that is infusing some of their interests into their creative work, how the same way you have done it with your culinary school and your lettering work.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's like what is the phrase? Dress for the job you want. Yeah. I think it's very similar when it comes to personal work, where if you're going to spend any of your free time, unpaid free time, outside of your full-time job or whatever else you do, your freelance work, you should make sure you enjoy it. Like, it makes me sad if I think about anyone doing extra work outside of their normal hours on something that they think they should be doing, or that their heart isn't in it. With passion projects, the point, even though, yes, my brain is just wired in a way where I would like to get paid for stuff eventually as a freelancer too. I don't have the luxury of not getting paid for my work, same with you. Like, I have to be thinking about, the money that's coming in, because I'm supporting myself. I don't have like the exact steady paycheck all the time. And so I am thinking about using my time wisely. However, I am the kind of person where if I'm not enjoying something, it's not sustainable for me. I at least need to be curious about it, or interested in it, or intrigued by it. So that's why when people ask me like, oh, like, can you only do passion projects about like fun stuff or light stuff or like silly stuff? Like, it seems like all your passion projects are very like fun or like silly. My answer is, you can do passion projects about whatever you want. It's just that outside of my like paid hours, I choose to work on fun stuff because I want to have fun at night. which is when I have time to work on my passion projects. And so I'm only able to sustain like a high output of personal work if it's fun for me. And that's just the way that I've been able to run my studio for this long, and I hope to continue to do it. I also do think that like I this doing personal projects just about stuff going on in my life or like jokes that like my friends and I would find funny has allowed me to build the audience that I built and also to get fun projects. Like whenever you wonder, how did that person get that project? It's likely a mix of 10 different things, but like I talked about at the very beginning of our like interview, like the know, like, trust thing is a really huge factor. And I hope that anyone who's listening who is hoping to get paid for their dream project someday, or like, I hope that you know that just being the best letterer, like there's no such thing as the best letterer one, like we're all different, but by sharing some of your interests and personality and sharing your story, people like that is just as like sticky or like it'll connect people with you just as much as they will connect to your lettering work. So if you have good lettering work and a good story, or people seem like they're like, I want to meet them, or like, I want to, like, if they seem fun to work with, that is just as powerful too, as having a good portfolio. So when you have both, you're really stacking the deck in your favor.
That's so great. And I think this is a great way of wrapping up our Q&A session with you. I think that you gave us a deep dive into how you built your business, how you started with your first projects, how you infuse some of your passions and interests in your work. And I think this will give us and our students hints on how to do that themselves. So as a last wrap up of this session, is there anything else that you would like to tell our students, Lauren?
What words of wisdom can I leave you with? I hope that this was helpful for everybody, and that I have a slide in the talk that I just gave this weekend that I think I'll share here. But I think that there's been a lot of rhetoric online for the last 15 years or so of like, build it and they will come. And a lot of what I talk about with passion projects of like, you need to make it first and tell people what you want. The nuance that I like to add to build it and they will come is build it, share it, talk about it so much that you're worried you're being annoying, and then keep talking about it, and they might come. And I say this because the internet is wonderful in so many ways and stressful in so many other ways. I've started thinking about putting personal work on the internet kind of as like a lottery ticket now. Like anything you put on the internet could be, you never know who's going to see it. Everyone's scrolling on their phones all the time. And so you may as well put it out there, like take your chances. However, I always want to be realistic with students that at the end of the day, you need to be passionate about what you're putting out there. So if it doesn't, go viral, or it doesn't get the response that you thought it would, at a base level, you need to feel like you would have wanted to make it anyways. Like the satisfaction that you got out of making it, the baseline is, at least I can put it in my portfolio. At least I have a piece that I'm proud of, because the internet is kind of a crapshoot now. So that's why I'm so like, I will never stop talking about why you should only make personal work you are genuinely passionate about, because it's less of a guarantee now that the right people are going to see it. It can still happen, of course, but you should, at a base level, like make stuff that you want to make, and because that is the only reason to do it now, because it is so heartbreaking if you make something for the algorithm and then it doesn't get picked up by the algorithm. Like that's so demoralizing. So you need to make stuff for you. And if it gets picked up by the algorithm or seen by the right person, that's the cherry on top. That should not be the goal. And I think that should be the primary driver of like the kind of work that letterers and any kind of creative people make. And then I think the last thing I guess I can tell your students is, if anyone is interested in mural painting, we actually just reshot my entire mural painting course that I have. And so it's getting like a huge refresh this year. And I am I think we're doing a like pre-launch for it. I need to check. I really should have come into this interview more prepared. But if you want to sign up for that, enrollment will be open, I think, through the end of this month. And then it's getting its like final, it's going to be re-released in the fall as its like final form. And it will be more expensive in the fall. So if you want to get in now, this would be the time to get in.
That's amazing. So I'm going to add the link to that so that our students can go and check it out. We would add it together with a replay for this session. Thank you so much, Lauren. This was amazing.
Yay.
And you are amazing as well. You're so
Of course.
great and generous at sharing what your experience and all the things that you have done. So I appreciate that. For all of our students, give it up for Lauren on the chat. This has been an amazing Q&A session. And for you, Lauren, I hope we meet in person again soon. We met a couple of years ago back then in that in Letter West conference. So I wish we will meet again in the future. In the meantime, I wish you the best in New York. I know that you moved to New York now, so I wish you the best.
Thank you. Yeah, I just moved to New York like 2 weeks ago. So now I'm like permanently here. I set up in the corner here. I'm like sitting in my like empty living room right now because I just moved. But so I was happy to do this. But yeah, I moved back here to, hopefully just kind of get back in there. And because I'm extroverted and like I just wanted to kind of be back in the like density and like excitement of a big city. So while I am sure it's going to be a little more stressful, I am very excited. So if anyone's passing through New York, I'm going to host workshops here. And if you want to meet up for a coffee, feel free to send me an email. I will try my best to get back to you, but I'm so swamped with emails, as I'm sure many people are. But yeah, thank you so much, Martina. This has been so lovely. Thank you. I've been reading the chat too a little bit now. And thank you, everyone. So great.
Amazing, Lauren. Have a beautiful day, everybody. See you on Thursday.
Thank you, you too. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.